Welcome to the Innate Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Loren Sofia, healer of my own fertility and health struggles, mother, functional fertility coach to thousands of women, and owner of Innate Fertility. I believe your body is innately wise, and so is your fertility. Sometimes we just need the tools to unlock it in abundance. I'm honored to guide you through each episode where we'll cover not just fertility, but how to rediscover the innate wisdom of your body, restore your connection with your physiology, bioenergetics, and metabolism, and get back in touch with Mother Nature and ancestral traditions. I can't believe it. I finally get to share my birth story, the story of the birth of baby E, the light of my life, with you, which you have been waiting so patiently for. I also cannot believe that this episode marks the end of yet another amazing season of the Innate Wisdom Podcast. And if you haven't caught up on all the episodes until this point, there are so many good ones, and I encourage you to go back and listen. In the last season, I shared what my fertility journey has been like, and I just want to remind you that I healed, and so can you. Your body is resilient. It has the capacity to heal itself. You have the capacity to create life. You're not destined to have the complications that your mother or sister did. Sometimes you just need the right tools or direction. I also shared my pregnancy journey up until the middle of the third trimester. I successfully avoided blood sugar issues and preeclampsia, all of which I was predisposed to and should have gotten. And this was done all through preparation. This episode continues where we left off and dives into my labor and delivery, which honestly, some parts are like a movie, as well as my postpartum experience. I also have a special guest joining me, my husband, Alex, who is going to be providing his perspective in all of this. And at the end, I'll be answering even more of your questions in a Q&A. So get ready. This is one wild ride, and I hope you enjoy. We're back, and we're just diving straight into the continuation of basically the episode that I did on my pregnancy and fertility journey. And that's actually in last season's episodes. It's the last episode, and this is going to be the last episode of this season, season 3. So this is my birth story, and I have the pleasure of having my husband, Alex.
Hello.
To help tell the story. He is Mr. Innate Fertility, as you referred to him. I did not call him that.
Proudly adopted the name. I am Mr. Innate Fertility.
Yes, Mr. Innate Fertility.
I'll take it. I'll take what I can get.
Yeah. So, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about my perspective. He's going to be talking about his perspective. We're going to be answering a lot of your questions. And just get ready for the ride because it is a fun one. So picking up where we left off last season, I was in my third trimester. And basically, I was feeling really good. The only thing that I had really been dealing with was PRAWN, PRAWN. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, around week 39, it just magically disappeared. Like, poof. So I really honestly believe that it had a lot to do with the horizontal expansion of my abdomen, because around 39 weeks, you kind of stop growing. You're growing really rapidly in the third trimester, but you kind of stop growing as quickly. And so because of the timing and because of the symptoms that I was experiencing, and again, listen to the episode where I talk about my pregnancy journey in last season if you want to catch up, but it just disappeared. So I was just... he was my personal masseuse and physical therapist while it was happening.
Yep. Thanks to the practitioners that we worked with that gave great exercises for me to help you with.
Yes.
I would like to think that a lot of that work helped with the PRAWN quite a bit. But even so, watching you and the baby grow pretty quickly, it was pretty understandable
Yes.
why you were experiencing pain. So I'm glad it stopped. We'll just say that.
Yeah, it's essentially nerve pain in your abdomen. And my nerves were just being stretched. And it's so interesting because I really didn't show that much until
Yeah,
like
not at all.
after, I think like finally at 6 months, I was like,
It was
okay,
like, boom.
I have a belly now.
Yep.
But before then, it was just like, oh, I look kind of, I was looking at photos of myself this past weekend actually, and I couldn't believe like
You look
how,
like really fit
how not pregnant I was.
for a long time. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she's pregnant.
Yeah. And then from there, I just like started growing. My belly just got bigger. And I think also it's important to just like, if you are self-conscious, I'm not saying that too to make anyone feel bad about how they are carrying either, because you never know what anyone's going through. For example, like women that don't necessarily pop ever, you know, how they carry small, oh, you're so tiny, and like it's 9 months and they barely look pregnant. They might have other issues going on that are not so fortunate, like a tilted uterus that is going to pose pregnancy complications. So take that into your own perspective. Like, don't judge how you're carrying and compare that to anyone else's.
Everyone's different.
Yeah, everyone's different. And like, as long as you're healthy and feeling good, that's all that matters. But I'm here to share my story. So I just wanted to share that. And my belly was big.
Yes, it was. It's funny too, because you're talking about the way people are carrying, and everyone's like, oh, you're carrying high, you're carrying low, I think it's a boy, or I think it's a girl, but you never really truly know.
Yes.
Right? So
That's true. Although we will talk about predictions for the baby very soon. So my prawn disappeared, and yeah, I think the most frustrating thing, honestly, not frustrating thing, the thing that I experienced the most in the last weeks of pregnancy that like really got to me, it wasn't like, I felt really good and I was like fully prepared to go over 40 weeks. I was prepared to go 42 weeks mentally. And we'll talk about why that's important. But the things that I was dealing with the most in the last weeks of pregnancy were more so like people's comments. And it's not even like people's like, not anyone on social media. It's like family, friends. And those are the ones that like were really unhelpful. And I had to really create boundaries and like mental ways of coping with them, because as much as I want to be a fortress, like they were really annoying and they were really starting to get to me and they were making me really angry. So I heard things like, are you ready for pain? Like, are you ready to push a watermelon out of your vagina? Are you ready for it to be over? Because if you're not ready yet, you will be ready for it to be over. And I was just like, these things are so unhelpful, and you may hear them or you may have heard them. And I really had to block them out and protect my energy. And as much as like the person saying them thought they were funny,
funny, yeah.
or like they were so unhelpful, and I had to really vocalize my boundaries more than once. So don't be afraid to do that, especially also in the beginning of your pregnancy too, especially as people start to make comments of like how you're carrying, or like if you're feeling sick, or, you know, anything. Just like, I think more than ever, it's really important to be your own advocate, not just like in a medical setting, but with the people around you. So that's a really big learning for me, because I'm a really big advocate for myself, usually, especially when it comes to like my health. But I really found that I had to exercise that side of myself with the people around me, which was really surprising. So
we won't name any names.
yeah. So I was like working out. I had a lot of energy in the third trimester. The week that I went into labor, I had done like a pretty fun weight strength training workout, I think with you. And
Yeah, we were working out together quite a bit.
yeah, it was.
I was even doing pregnancy yoga, which, let me tell you, you work out muscles that, I mean, I like to lift weights, but there's some muscles I was working that were very hard to work out.
Yes.
Hip flexors and like all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. It's, you know, don't knock it until you try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of energy. You know, I think other things that I may have been dealing with were like a little more hunger in the middle of the night. Sometimes I would need to like wake up and eat something because I was just really hungry. Like my metabolism and the caloric needs were just so high. No matter how much I ate in the evening, I would just like need to eat a lot more often. So I had my kind of routine. It didn't happen every night. I would say it happened less often than not, but maybe 2, sometimes 3 days a week, I would wake up and be like, I'm going to have a snack now. And then I go back to bed. So that's kind of what I was doing. But yeah, otherwise, the pregnancy pillow that you got me was amazing. And I slept like a baby.
Yeah. I don't remember the brand, but it was good.
Yeah.
We can look it up. We can find it.
Yeah. Let's talk about labor. Like I mentioned,
Oh, yeah.
I was fully prepared to go over like 40 weeks. I was fully prepared to go into 42 weeks because your first pregnancy, you're typically going to go over an average of 10 days past your due date, quote unquote. So labor actually started 2 days before my due date, and I was actually walking my dogs, and then I played fetch with them. And then, I should backtrack. I had started to feel contractions that morning early, like very early, like 5 a.m. And I was like, okay, this is just like a little bit of cramping, feeling really mild, but it could mean the start of it, but it could be a couple days before labor actually begins. And then
Went to the midwife appointment.
yeah, I had a bunch of appointments that day. I went to we saw our midwife. We just so happened to see our midwife. I saw my chiropractor, and they're like, yeah, just keep us posted. Like,
I think they were secretly, maybe not secretly, but I think they both kind of knew that labor might, like, that was the vibe I was getting, that, like, labor might be starting, but they were like, yeah, it could just be some cramps. Just keep us posted.
yeah. So they were really nonchalant about it, and I was like also. So I was walking my dogs, and then I played fetch with them, and then I was like, oh, this is like a little more uncomfortable. Let me just go inside and rest for a little bit. Also, we have to get ready for dinner. Like, let me just do that. And as soon as I walked into the entrance of our house, my water broke. And, oh, I should mention too, like, my water broke, but for at least 2 weeks, I can't remember exactly how long, I was weeping. So it's not amniotic fluid, but it's the fluid around the sac. It just kind of was just like coming out, and it felt just like little gushes here and there. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but it can happen. Not every woman experiences this. So I was just like, kind of just releasing fluid for like 2 weeks, not labor fluid, not amniotic fluid. And so one of the things that my midwife gave me were these pH strips, which actually I use in my practice. When I had a brick and mortar practice, I would use them to kind of test oral microbiome status. But you can also use them to test for amniotic fluid. And so she gave them to me to take home. And after that large gush, when I walked into the front door, I tested it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is amniotic fluid. This is my water breaking. So basically, I transitioned very fast into active labor. We really didn't have like the slow roll into the 511. We went straight into a 311. And if you know what that means, basically it's 1 hour of contractions that are
every 3 minutes that last a minute, right?
They last a minute long, and they're 5 minutes apart. That's typically when they say you would go to the hospital. Okay, so 1 minute of contractions, 5 minutes apart for 1 hour. I was 1 minute of contractions, 3 minutes apart for 1 hour, like immediately. And so I was just like breathing through things, not too bad. But this one was like...
I went into panic mode a little bit.
Because we were totally expecting like...
I thought it was going to be late.
2 weeks from the date that we were actually starting things.
But I had these like grand plans to... I like to cook. I cook for us quite a bit. So I wanted to go food prep, make sure we had supplies, all that sort of stuff. And I was not prepared. So as soon as that happened, I'm like, I got to go to the grocery store. I got to start a pot of stew that I was going to make. All this stuff that I wanted to accomplish. So I was like running around like a madman. Also slightly panicking a little bit because my wife went into labor and this is our first child. So naturally.
Yeah. So that was fun. And yeah, basically went into active labor right away. And I think we all of us, like the midwife, we did, the midwife assistant, or my doula, we thought that we were going to give birth that evening.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. You were dilating fast and contractions were coming pretty quickly and they were strong.
I also transitioned really fast. Like there's a point in labor when you transition, and I got the like shakes, you know? You're basically, your nervous system is like, I got the shivers, my teeth were chattering, and like they were like, "Oh, yeah, this is happening." Yeah. I mean, I basically was like on the toilet, leaning over our bathroom sink.
Got the Swiss ball out. You were kind of leaning on the Swiss ball on your knees a couple times.
I was in the tub.
Went into the tub a few times. There was a point in the night where we were just in the bed together. You were kind of on your side. And I remember this pretty distinctly because I was getting pretty tired, even though I wasn't doing any work. I was just there. I mean, I was working, I was helping, supporting. But there was a point where in between contractions, I was kind of like falling asleep. But then the contraction would start and I would wake up and I would start putting back support on your lower back. And then the contraction would end and I would start to nod off again. And the next contraction would come and I'd put my hands back on your back for support.
Yeah, yeah. It was a whole family affair. The dogs were in the bed. Alex was in the bed. The midwife was on the edge with me. And her assistant, my doula, was also trading off as we got like into the evening to just take breaks. I'm going to pause here because we have an audience question about
sure.
like,
Yeah.
why did you decide to have the people that you did at your birth? So I had my husband, Alex. I had my midwife, and I had my midwife's assistant, who is a doula, and that's it. I did this purposefully. And what were you saying?
I was going to say we got a request from a family member who wanted to be there.
Yes.
Most notably your mother. Not my mother, but yours. Wanted to participate, but go on. Why we didn't have anyone else.
Yeah, she really wanted to be there. But I think what I'll say is, first of all, every person that you have at your birth may or may not add 2 hours to your birth length. And that's something that my midwife told me, but I wanted to have as little people as possible because instinctually I felt that it would aggravate my nervous system to have too many people at my birth. I am an introvert. I concentrate best when there's actual like, you know, peace and quiet. I don't have to cater to anyone's nervous system and how they're reacting to me. And that is really why that 2-hour rule applies. So I wanted to have as quiet and peaceful of a labor, but also as quick of a labor as possible. Mm-hmm. And it really worked up until a certain point, which you'll find out. But yeah, so, you know, just keep that in mind. I ended up really feeling like it was the right decision to not have my mom there. And I just want you to also keep that in mind. If you feel like you have to please somebody because they really want to be at your birth, or they feel entitled to or deserve to be at your birth because they birthed you or whatever, that is not the case. You don't owe anyone anything. This is your birth. And like those concessions that you make may end up costing you in the long run. So be selfish and especially in this time. So don't be afraid to do that. They have to understand. And if they don't, that's their problem, not yours. So like I mentioned, we transitioned very fast. I dilated very fast. And then, and by the way, I never looked at the clock ever, but it was all happening very fast. Per my midwife's feedback, per your feedback, like I thought I was going to be giving birth that evening. That said, we hit a wall. Mm-hmm. And like that wall just like was not moving. It was just stuck. I couldn't push past it or push it down. And so this continued for hours. I don't know how long, because again, I didn't look at the clock, but
I would say probably 5 to 6 hours, maybe?
I think it was longer than that,
Maybe.
given the time that we,
Yeah.
yeah. But I would honestly say it was like 10 hours.
Think so? You might be right. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
It's hard to remember all the small details of time.
Yes. But I think, according to my biological clock in that regard, not the one that is bestowed upon women, that's what I felt. And so I agreed to cervical check, and I actually started closing up. So my cervix was not only, I don't know what the opposite of dilating is, but it was starting to close up, and there was a lot of swelling. So there was a lot of inflammation. We tried arnica. Arnica is an oil internally. We tried resting. We tried different positions. And
I just want to say that the baby's head was right against your cervix as well.
yeah.
He was right there.
I could feel
It's just
him
the
in my
cervix
lower back.
stopped dilating, so he was down in your pelvis for
A long time. Yeah. And like if you were to touch my lower back, you could feel his head. Like he was there.
He was right there.
He was ready. So,
But all that being said, that whole time that you were stuck at the wall, we were, the baby's vitals were checked.
yeah.
And his heart rate was fine. There was no signs of stress. So the midwife said, we don't feel any need to call it an emergency yet. So it's kind of up to you to decide how long you can endure what you were enduring, which is pain.
Yes. It went from being very intense to in the morning, I knew it was the morning because the light started to come through, to pain. And so we had a plan A and a plan B and a plan C, actually. And I mean, I've coached enough women, for me personally, only feel comfortable to have these plans. And this is something that the midwife wanted. This is something that I wanted as well, because I have coached women whose first births, they come to me for their second pregnancies, but their first birth, they held on for 75 hours and then ended up having extreme trauma because they had high blood pressure and had to get an emergency C-section. I am experienced enough and I've seen enough to know that not having a plan B or C is a bad idea in my eyes. God bless those who are really committed and really feel, I can't think of the right word, but
Stalwart.
they just this is how it's going to go, and this is my plan, and this is the only thing that I am preparing for. But again, as a practitioner and having seen more than just that, I felt comfortable having plan A, plan B, plan C. And so when we decided to transfer, I was completely comfortable with that idea. Of course, I didn't really want to go.
Yeah,
but
naturally. But I will say for plan B, for anyone who's planning a home birth, to actually be prepared for plan B, because we did have to do, well, not you, but had to do a little bit of running around to gather things, because it all happened so fast because we didn't think you were going to go into labor that quickly, and then, actually start to go to active labor so quickly that we didn't have our hospital bag ready, and we didn't have accommodations for the dogs. And,
right.
Fortunately, our next door neighbors, they are amazing people. They took the dogs for us. But all those little things, if it happens so fast, you don't necessarily think about. So maybe consider packing your hospital bag and making some arrangements just in case.
Maybe at 38 weeks, not 39 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, we were mentally prepared for plan B, but we were not physically prepared.
Fortunately, it wasn't a ton of prep. We were prepared, so it didn't require a lot. And then, once we're at the hospital, you could also make a trip back home or whatever you need to do. But,
yeah. So, I knew my limits, and at that point, I needed a reprieve because things went from being really intense to actually being really painful. And my cervix was just very swollen and inflamed. And so I needed a break, and the arnica wasn't working. And that's when, Like that's why I'm a big fan of having functional, holistic approaches, but also Western medicine is there for a reason and it comes into play when you need it. And so I decided to exercise it. And my plan B was a hospital. And I won't say it out loud because I don't want to blow up my midwife's favorite spot for her backup. But if you are in Denver, just message me or email me and I will give you the name. They are a hospital, but they have a whole midwife unit. And so they are very friendly to home birth transfers, unlike a lot of hospitals. They won't judge you, and they have midwives ready to go. You're not going to get an OB right away. Of course, there's an overseeing OB, but the person you will be working with is a midwife and nurses.
They respect your wishes too. When you go in, and if you don't want something, right, you can convey that to them, and they might give you their rationale as to why you think they might think you need it, but ultimately they didn't push it onto us or say no, right? They respected any requests and your wishes that you had going in.
Yeah. So I have zero disappointment about having
10 out of 10 transfer experience.
Let's get there. But I have zero disappointment about having a transfer because I was mentally prepared. We had plan B ready to go. I think where a lot of people are experiencing trauma almost, it's because they don't have that plan B and they're not mentally prepared and then they don't know what to expect and they haven't vetted the hospitals around them well enough. And so when they get there, they are treated like, oh, you're the home birth that, went wrong. Oh, silly you, because that's how most hospitals are. So I would do your due diligence, even if you are having home birth, figure out what that plan B is for your non-emergency case, because I chose to transfer. But yeah, it was really not traumatizing to do that because we had been so comfortable with the next sort of phase in the process. So that said, at that point, things were getting really painful. And that's when things turned into a movie. Because
absolutely. Literally,
I'll let you tell this part.
You watch a movie about like a rom-com or something, right? And they have to go to the hospital, and the lady's screaming in the car, and they gotta rush, and maybe they get pulled over or something like that, and they gotta fly down. So we pile into the car. Loren's in a lot of pain, so she's screaming essentially for the contractions in the back seat. And I'm a little tired, but I'm okay. Start driving to Denver. And for anyone who knows the area, I-25 sucks. There's always traffic. And on this particular day when we were driving in, there happened to be a fresh accident, right as we got to I-25. So we're talking stopped traffic. We're hearing sirens, emergency responders that are making their way to the highway. So I'm like, what do I do? And she's still in the back screaming the whole time.
I have amniotic fluid just gushing out of me in the back seat. I'm just gushing amniotic fluid, holding on, breathing.
So, I end up hopping the shoulder and I am driving pretty fast between the center barrier of the highway and the cars that are in the left lane. And, sometimes cars try to block you off, but fortunately I was able to sneak past everyone and just fly down the shoulder past this accident into a freshly opened highway and just drove, 90 miles per hour straight as fast as I could to the hospital and make our way in. And then we get there and we pull up still screaming. We get her into a wheelchair, we get in, and we're trying to get her situated, and she's like, please hurry up to the staff, and it was a whole experience. It literally was a movie experience. But, again, the hospital was great, and they got us in
pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. We had to, get the insurance and sign forms and, all that sort of stuff, which was the holdup. But
the pain was, really peaking. It was, and then, I think there's a lot of this pain-free birth stuff going on. And I think it's really important to understand, birth is very intense and, it can be painful though. And I think where that pain-free birth stuff really comes into play is it gives you the knowledge of your body and it helps you understand what's happening and what to expect. And that's where it can give you understanding in the pain and it kind of makes that pain less. That's exactly how emotional freedom technique works too. But it's different to understand like your threshold. And I knew after however many hours of labor, I think it was like
28, I think.
no, when I went into labor and when we transferred, it was like
19-ish? 5 p.m. to 11 a.m.?
yeah. Well,
16?
9.
Yeah.
Is that right math?
I don't know.
Anyway.
We're not sleeping because we have a baby, so that's another story.
Yeah. Again, I was in active labor the whole time.
Yeah, it's not just like a lot of times what women are like kind of you start labor, but there's a long period of time before active labor before things speed up. But because of that wall you hit, you were because if it had proceeded as expected, you might have had the baby by midnight.
Yeah. That's when prediction wise, and like we can talk about what we think the reason for that stall was. But at this point, like my cervix was so swollen, I needed rest and I needed to take a break and to get that inflammation down. So what we did was I did accept an epidural, and that allowed me to, like, as soon as that epidural hit, I immediately almost like was ready to take a nap. I was exhausted. And that's what I requested. I said to the staff, I was like, I don't really want to talk about anything else until I have taken a 4-hour nap. Come back in 4 hours. Thank you. Goodbye. And they respected my wishes.
Yeah.
So that was lovely. I got to really rest and recuperate and kind of reset. And that's exactly what I needed. So I do want to mention, though, by the time I got to the hospital, I had dilated from 9 centimeters, which at my house, it went down to like 8 or 7.5. And that's when we're like, okay, we're stalling. Let's try some arnica. Things were still stalled. And that was like hours and hours ago. By the time we got to the hospital, I was 5 centimeters dilated and my contractions were super irregular. I was having like 1 and then like 5 within the span of a minute. And then like 1 and then like 5. And so I really, again, I needed that break and that reprieve. And so I think you need to understand kind of what your limits are. And what I've been trying to say throughout all of this is like, don't try to white knuckle this idea of this thing that you had in your head of how things were going to go, because it can really end up working against you. And like, if I hadn't decided to transfer when I did, I probably, maybe the baby would have started to have like, distress, or maybe I would have started to develop like, I don't know, a fever or an infection or something, because I was holding on to this idea and I was not willing to be flexible or adaptive to what my body was asking for. So I was really trying to, of course, I had this goal, but I also had this plan B. And again, I was very willing and ready, and I knew my limits and what that plan B was going to be, and being able to shift into that and accept that without beating myself up or like getting really upset and allowing that fact that I'm super upset to work against what was happening in the present and what my body needed in the present moment. So I think, again, this is another really important lesson here, but I accepted the epidural. One thing that I was offered when I got there, though, was fentanyl. So, just FYI, some epidurals have fentanyl in it already.
It's controlled. It's not like you're just getting fentanyl, but yes.
But this epidural did not. It was just morphine. But sometimes they will offer you fentanyl separately. I declined that. But, just FYI, if you are trying to plan your plan B, ask that question so that you are prepared to figure out what you want to do before it happens. So I accepted that and
took a nap. Took a nice nap. I took a nap too.
Had a discussion with the midwife on call, if you get an epidural, you have to get a catheter. And I was trying to talk my way out of the catheter because I was just like, I do not want a catheter. But
Meanwhile, I don't know if you remember this, but you like filled your pee bag.
yeah, I did.
So it's a good thing they require a catheter.
Yeah. Because when you get an epidural, you can't feel, well, it depends what kind of epidural and how much. You're in control of how much you're giving yourself after the first bolus. But yeah, I was feeling it. And, I did not press for additional doses or administer it onto myself. I think after that first dose.
Yeah, just one, I think you did.
Yeah. So I wanted, even though I transferred and needed that reprieve, I wanted to still feel everything and still have the birth that I wanted to. I wanted to be able to move around. So after my nap, we had a discussion with the midwife on call. She recommended Pitocin, and my contractions were still irregular. So I accepted it. I accepted the lowest dose, and they actually had to decrease the dose because my contractions, it was working too well. So they decreased it to 25% of the lowest dose. So I took 75% less than the lowest dose of Pitocin.
Kickstarted it.
Yeah, it kickstarted things. It got things back on track. The swelling went down eventually. And what we did was I really took the time to just rest until things started feeling intense again, like I was really back into labor. But what we did was I did a bunch of different positions on the peanut ball, and as well as the this inflatable pillow that you could just kind of be on your hands and knees.
It's like a wedge almost, right?
Yeah, a wedge. So I was going back and forth between the wedge, the peanut ball. I did like a queen's throne position because I could adjust the bed to be like almost like a staircase. And after, that, things really started to get intense again. I threw up a bunch of times. I got a question, like, oh, did you get heartburn during your pregnancy? And no, I did not get heartburn until right before I threw up, which makes sense. And then things like really
moved along pretty quickly. Once they were like, okay, let's push. I think it was 45 minutes maybe of pushing, something like that.
Yeah, and before that, point, I was laboring on my hands and knees, rocking back and forth. And honestly, the nurses and the midwife on call, and my midwife actually turned into my doula and was there the whole time. So she was really helping me from like a doula perspective, doula standpoint, providing that sort of support. And then they were actually like, I've never seen anyone who's gotten an epidural move that way. And I think it's because I kept the dose so low. It was just enough to take the edge off of like all the inflammation that was in my cervix and then just release that. And then between the positions, the rest that I got, it just happened. So yeah, we played tug of war during.
Yeah, that was fun. I think if you, like some guys might be squeamish about these types of things. I'm not at all. So I watched the entire thing, watched the baby's head crowning. But we played tug of war. One of the nurses there, suggested, because I was doing various things along the way, like back support and holding your hand or whatever it might be. But, he had suggested tug of war because it adds counter pressure to her pushing, right? So she can pull on, I think they gave us a towel or a sheet or something like that.
A sheet, yeah.
So she could pull backwards while pushing. But I was standing in front of her and I was the anchor for the tug of war. And I'm a big, strong guy, so she didn't really have any success moving me or anything like that. Yeah, I think it was a nice way for me to feel, actively a part of what you were trying to do. So it was nice other than just kind of the standing by and offering, verbal support or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You were super helpful in that regard. And I felt like I was like really only looking at you and the mirror. Somebody was holding a mirror for me. Yeah. That was helpful too. The mirror was motivating for me because I could see like progress.
Yeah, that's, like literally watching the baby come out.
Personally, that's very motivating for me. And that's also why I didn't want to look at the clock at all. Because if I knew what time it was, I would just be like, oh, it's that time. Oh my God, this time, much time has passed. And like, we're still here. And so I didn't look at the clock at all really during labor, just kind of like knew what time it was based on the lighting. But yeah, the active pushing part was like maybe 45 minutes.
Maybe an hour max.
I think it was 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. It was pretty quick. Well, quick relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Baby E was born at 2:01 a.m. on Saturday, and I went into labor on Thursday. So that was like the day before Christmas Eve, 23rd of December, right on his due date. I guess he just really...
Uncommon, I guess.
Yeah, it's not common at all, just FYI. I believe only about 10% of births are actually on their due date. I guess he really wanted to just come on his due date. So yeah, again, I was moving a lot. I was on my hands and knees, and like I found that during the pushing, I was like in this runner's position, holding up one of my knees really high while I was on my back. And that was really comfortable for me. And I also pushed against somebody was either their hand. I think it was Katie's hand.
Midway.
Yeah. She was acting as counter pressure too while I played tug of war. And yeah, all our wishes were met. It was really a seamless transition from what I wanted at home to this hospital. And again, I know that's rare, but I think it's rare because I was prepared for Plan B and have vetted the plan and then, nearby hospitals. So yeah, all our wishes were met. We did delayed cord clamping. We opted out of erythromycin, antibiotic ointment for the eyes. We opted out of vitamin K right away, and I had no tearing and I had no prolapsing. So I think...
All in all, it's pretty smooth once we got past the wall.
Yeah. Again, I think it's inflammation. And I can talk about why I think that happened. But yeah, no tearing, which was like,
But I think, again, if you keep going back to talking about preparation, you did a lot of preparation prior to the birth, right? So pelvic floor exercises,
nutrition
support.
We did also perineum
stretching that I assisted with, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare for this. Just put your best foot forward to not run into these issues when you're actually giving birth.
Yeah. And so a lot of that I was doing like before I was even pregnant. And I think what I really added in was just that perineum stretching, and which you helped me with, which was really great. It's a bonding experience for you and your partner.
Yeah, for any I don't know, any guys listening or ladies, if you want to talk to your husbands or your partners about it, but it's really not that challenging. It is a bonding experience, and it helps them feel like they're helping you actively prepare for your childbirth, which is important. So
yeah. So all in all, very smooth. I had very little bleeding, very, very little bleeding. Once the placenta came out, it was very smooth. It was huge. It was very, it was very, very, very deep red. Like
healthy placenta.
Super healthy. I decided to encapsulate my placenta. If you do, you have to. Some hospitals have rules. So like, because I wanted to do that, I had to get the placenta out of the hospital within 2 hours of delivering. Otherwise, they were going to take it and like throw it out. So my midwife was like, okay, I'm going to go do this. I will come back. But yeah, I did that. And let's see, we got to rest.
I got to cut the cord.
Yeah.
That was cool.
And yeah, baby E was born extremely healthy.
8 pounds, 6 ounces. Big, healthy boy.
Yeah, big, healthy boy.
Because he was in Loren's pelvis for so long, which will tie into the conversation about why we might have stalled out. But his head was a little canonical.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Cone-shaped?
I think so.
Which apparently completely normal. Don't freak out if that happens to you and you see it. It honestly went back to normal like within a week.
No, within like 48 hours.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay, way faster. My memory is, not as great. But it was very interesting seeing that. But, he's completely healthy and fine. And his skull went back to normal shape.
Yeah. And so one of the questions that I got from you guys is like, did you know that I was having a boy?
Nope.
No.
Surprise, baby.
Okay, let me caveat that. So we decided to keep it a surprise throughout our whole pregnancy. However, I had a feeling it was a boy for a couple of different reasons. One is when we actually conceived or timed intimacy, just so happened to time intimacy during my cycle. If you are a conscious conception student, you will know what I'm referring to because I talk about how the timing can influence gender. And so I thought it was a boy just solely based on that. I also thought it was a boy because I had 2 dreams that I was having a boy and that we had a little boy. And I think one of the really interesting things, people kept guessing, and a lot of people said they thought it was a girl. But we went on a baby moon to Mexico, and there was an abuela in one of the stores that I stopped in, and she's like, "You're having a boy. I know you're having a boy." And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool," because I just dreamt that. So when he was born, I was not really surprised, but I think you thought we were having a girl.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you why, to be honest, but I just thought we were having a girl. It's a 50-50 decision, so I just, that's what I thought.
But actually, 70% of the time, the mom is right. I'm guessing. Yeah.
Don't doubt her. She's right.
So if you have intuition, that just goes to show the power of intuition. But we were surprised, of course. And then, let's see, what other questions? Why did you wait to find out? We wanted to keep it a surprise.
Yeah, that's the way it used to be back in the day.
It's true. Yeah. We only have so many surprises in our life now.
It's a special feeling when it happens, right? Otherwise, you're like, I know I'm having a girl and like, whatever, right? But, it was nice to just not know. And then when he came out, it was just the excitement is that much stronger, I think. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We don't even have the pleasure of getting lost going somewhere anymore because we have
exact instructions.
Google Maps that just tell you where to go. So, I think that we wanted to keep this a surprise. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, let's see, there was another question. During birth, did you reach a point where you thought you couldn't take it anymore? So, I would say, no, in that, I know my limits. So, I was not going to let myself get to that point. Mm-hmm. And I knew when I needed to change something. And I communicated that. And so, I was in labor for over 30 hours. And that was active labor. It's pretty insane. And I think without preparation, physical preparation, all the exercises that I did, all the workouts really helped me with the adapting to the physical demand of that, but also all the mental preparation that I did too helped me adapt to the mental load that I was going to be carrying throughout this process. But also following your intuition and knowing yourself and what you need, not anybody else, but what you need is really important so that you can have a labor that aligns with you and that you're going to look back on and feel like, okay, I'm okay with the way this went. So I knew I needed to change something, and I knew something was kind of off. And it wasn't what I was expecting as far as pain. Because once it started to get painful, I was like, okay, something is off here. I need reprieve. I've been at this a long time. I need a break. Let's transfer. Because I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I'm not going to, the definition of insanity is to just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I needed to change something. And that's when I decided to transfer. So, when I was pushing, I was so relieved because I had felt like pushing for a whole day, over 24 hours. And when it was time to push, I was just like, Hallelujah, thank
Oh my
God.
God, you should have
Like,
seen, you should have seen my reaction. You were like absorbed in, labor land. But I was sitting next to our midwife, and as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, and I just went like this on her shoulder. Finally.
and I wasn't saying hallelujah because I was like ready for it to be over, although like, by that time I was tired. But it was more like I had been suppressing this feeling that I've been wanting to exert. I've been like wanting to push this whole time, and I couldn't because I wasn't dilated enough. And like, I wasn't suppressing that urge, but I certainly wasn't trying to push harder in an already swollen cervix. So, yeah, I think that's what I would say about that. And then again, I think your intuition will be tested to the max. So really start to get familiar with it and follow it, because I think that we had such a great experience. Our midwife said that it was a 10 out of 10 transfer, like the best transfer she's ever had.
Yeah, it was very fortunate for us.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to be prepared for possibly that scenario. Again, be prepared with what you want and don't want, because once you get there and you are in labor, you're not going to be able to think about any of that.
Yeah.
So let me talk about what the reasons I think that the stalling happened, and you can chime in too. But after talking to like some of the specialists that I work with, like my chiropractor, my physiotherapist, I think this is what happened. So baby dropped into my cervix, or dropped low, almost like too fast. Like bonked his head, caused inflammation. But the reason that he was stuck there is because his head was just like slightly not in the right position.
It was like kind of.
It was straight on when he's supposed to be like reaching up. It's vertex, but it's a variation of vertex. So it's head down, but a variation of that. And his head just wasn't cocked in the right way. And your uterus is supposed to take care of that for you. But based on the labor and delivery that I had, based on how he came out too, he came out like a dolphin. That's not usually the way that they come out. They twist their bodies at some point.
What do you mean?
Well, he came out like this. Boop.
Fair enough.
He's supposed to come out like, So baby E ended up having a tongue tie that we, can talk about. I think I'm going to have a separate episode on like tongue ties. I want his PT and OT to come on and talk about, midline restrictions and all that, because they'll talk about how there's not a lot of studies done on this yet, because, well, one, they're becoming more common, but also like they're becoming more observed and noticed. And suffice to say, like, I prepared for that scenario. Like, I worked on mitigating that. But sometimes tongue ties are not only just due to methylation and like nutrients. Baby just had one. So because of that midline restriction, I think that he could not cock his head back as easily as a baby without midline restriction. And that's also why he came out like a dolphin. But I think that is also one of the reasons why he ended up sitting in my pelvis for so long, is because he just needed that little help. And so the manual work, once we got the inflammation down, the manual work with the peanut ball was able to help him get his head into the right position. But that's kind of why I think that happened. We'll never know for sure because there's no
done and
studies.
dusted. He's out.
Done and dusted. But yeah, so question for you.
Sure.
What did you do to prepare to support me for labor?
For labor? Well, I read a couple of books, which I think is important. I read So You're Having a Baby. What's the orange book called?
Ideal Birth Partner?
The Ideal Birth Partner. There might have been one other one that I was like flipping through because it was quite long and there was a lot of content, but there was some chapters dedicated to birth partners. A lot of that. I spoke with the midwife about kind of the role of the birth partner in helping support, my wife while she was giving birth. Mentally preparing on my own terms, but I knew that I had to be there to support her emotionally, physically, and to give her my attention so that she had the help that she needed to get through this successfully. And I think one of the key things any birth partner that could really do just to help out is just be present, right? Just don't walk out of the room unless like it's a planned break or whatever. Right? Be present, be there, offer your support verbally, physically, whatever they need, and listen to them. Don't insert yourself into the situation with, I think you should do this and this and this, right? Like listen to what they're feeling, ask how you can help them out. And also, if you have a midwife, maybe ask the midwife on the side so you're not throwing too much at them like when they're trying to focus on pain and endurance. So I think there's a lot you can do, but that's kind of I think what my experience primarily was.
Yeah, I would say you were an amazing birth partner.
Thank you.
And before I went into labor too, I said, I don't want to be saved. Please don't try to save me, because
I just offered support really.
A lot of the time, you always try to make things better. And I wanted to just be able to experience this without the pressure of like, he thinks there's something wrong. Let me, maybe there is something wrong. Like,
But you can also, one of the other things I think too is to try to take away external stimulus that you don't need to worry about. Right?
Yeah.
Like I went and I got food ready, right? So we don't have to worry about food. We know she's going to have food to eat. Like there's a lot of little things that you can do outside of the actual labor experience that are supporting in their own ways as well.
Right. Yeah. And I just really wanted to acknowledge that though, that you really let me just be and you didn't try to save me.
It's your experience.
Yeah.
I just tried to fulfill your wishes as best I could.
Yeah. You're the best.
Thanks.
Let's see what other questions we have. Was there ever a point where you were freaking out?
Only when the water broke. I had to calm down. Like, I don't know. It's just me, right? There really was no reason to panic given how long labor is just in general. Like there was plenty of time to get the little chores done, but it was just like, oh my God, it's happening, right? I gotta. So that's kind of the only really moment I was freaking out. The only thing I will say was that there was a point where, for lack of a better term, I was feeling emotionally, not traumatized, but I was getting emotionally drained. But it was because we hit that wall and I could see you in so much pain without progress, right? If there was progress, I think it would have been totally fine. But because there wasn't progress, there was a point where I was getting a little bit emotional and it was just draining me. So I was like, oh crap, what should we move to plan B, right? And then we had the conversation with the midwife and made that decision, and ultimately everything worked out. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It won't be it's not for the lighthearted.
Yeah, but you have to, everyone internalizes their emotions differently. But I would just say, don't be stoic. You can show your emotion, but you have to realize that a lot's going to happen. Unexpected things will happen. Keep control of your emotions. Be ready for plan B, like you've been saying. And if you need to make that decision, you make that decision. Mm-hmm. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it too is like providing as little interference, like when I think of interference, like radio waves almost,
mm-hmm.
as possible for you or me to do my job and focus. And you did a really great job of that.
Yeah, I will say, like any birth partner out there, don't be like 21 questions. Can I get you this? Can I do that? Can I do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? Because that's just gonna that's that radio wave interference, right?
Yeah. Another question too is like, what was it like watching your wife in her ultimate form?
What did I call it? I think I called you like a warrior goddess or something, right? I think there's something like that when we were like on the final, like maybe when it was over, like when the baby was coming out. Like, I just don't remember, but I mean it was incredible, right? She persevered through, was it 28 hours or plus of labor,
Over
30 hours of labor, and experiencing that wall we've been talking about. I mean, it was incredible. She's incredibly strong. She powered through it like a champion. And it was a very interesting experience in a good way. It's like it's a once in a lifetime experience. It's not something that happens to you every day, right? So you're watching the person that you love go through something like that, it's empowering as the partner. I mean, I feel empowered, It was just an amazing experience to watch her be that warrior goddess that powered through it. So,
Well, thanks.
yep, you're welcome.
Well, I want to give a huge shout out to our midwife, Katie and Shalom, and they're at Sierra Madre Midwifery in Thornton, Colorado.
And Katie's daughter, Kayleese,
who's the doula and midwife assistant.
Who, coincidentally, Shalom, who was the other midwife in the practice that usually they do it together, was also pregnant and was too pregnant to attend our birth.
Yeah,
so
but Shalom was great too.
Yeah, Shalom was awesome too. So Kaylee's ended up helping out. So many thanks to all three of them.
Yeah, we love you guys. And another question is, would you home birth again? If so, what would you do differently and what would you keep the same?
Is this for me or is this for both? I think for both of us. I think we would do it again.
I think, yeah.
I think we have more knowledge going into it round 2.
Of course, with any experience.
Yeah. I think, there's probably a couple of slight preparation differences, but I would go through the same steps of vetting plan B and plan C. Mm-hmm. But, like I said earlier, maybe being like fully prepared for plan B. So there's a little bit less like hecticness.
Earlier on, preparing maybe that bag a month in advance rather than not.
Just having me throwing a bunch of crap into a bag the day of.
I mean, you did a pretty good job, though, given the circumstances.
I think, listen, you might always forget, like, little things. But, I think, it just, again, like, personally, the only thing that I thought was very interesting was, like, I'm just going to tangent here a little bit. But, like, when we actually gave birth at the hospital, a lot of stuff comes out of you other than the baby. So I was like, wow, I can't imagine doing this at home. But I had a conversation with the midwife, and she was like, yeah, we have all of the materials necessary to prepare for all of that and all the cleanup that goes into it. And so, like, totally I would do it again at home. I think one of the biggest factors that I noticed because we were at home was her comfort level outside of all the pain of labor. Mm-hmm. But being at home, being with our dogs who we love, being in your bed, being in your own bathtub, having me to go grab something in the house or, the food, you need to eat something. It's like home cooked food. It's not hospital food. There's like a ton of benefits to doing it at home, unless you're a huge Western medicine advocate, which is totally acceptable. Everyone's got different opinions on things, right? But, I think doing it at home offers you a ton of comfort that you would not get at a hospital. Yeah.
I would say too, like, you're just so much more monitored in like an intrusive way at a hospital. Like my midwife was always taking my vitals and the baby's vitals, but it was so much less intrusive and disruptive to what my process was than like when we got to the hospital and they needed to check my blood pressure and they needed to like, do all this stuff every hour and, or like, was it every hour or 4 hours? It felt like every hour.
It felt like every hour.
From the postpartum perspective, like after labor and the recovery, I really did not like being in the hospital at all. I think that's where like not just the home birth part of giving birth shines, but like the home birth part of the postpartum experience is really, really awesome. And I was so glad to be home because it was not restful being at the hospital. Mm-hmm. They were coming in constantly, and no matter how much we told them to please just not, it was a completely different team from the birthing team once we were in the postpartum wing, and I just was so over it.
I was over the food. One of the best nights that we had at the hospital was when we ordered takeout and had some real food, not just the hospital food. No offense to that hospital, but the food was, like sandwiches and juice and milk, right? So yeah.
So that's something else, like, I really noticed and would really, one of the reasons I would welcome a home birth again. And, I think your body also kind of, like, has done this already at the second time, too. So the likelihood of me having the same issue I did the first time is not high. Mm-hmm. And my midwife also said I would be a great candidate for a home birth again. Just having gone through what, sometimes, midwives will witness, okay, this person maybe didn't handle things. Some people think home birth is for them and then it doesn't end up being for them. And that's why they transfer, or, maybe they experience some complications during pregnancy. My midwife wanted to clone me during my whole pregnancy. And she also said, like, if you wanted to do home birth again, you would be a perfect candidate to do so. And so I think that's just a reflection of like, okay, this was a really good fit. It just, I needed something else at a certain point, and that's when Western medicine came into play, and I'm glad I had both options. But I totally would consider that. And we're not trying to get pregnant in the immediate future, but
Get some sleep with the baby. Yeah. Consistent sleep first. I think then we can consider something.
Yeah. As far as breastfeeding, I had no issues out of the gate. Somebody asked, do you feel like your total calorie intake directly contributes to your breast milk production? Yes, it does, especially in the first 3 months while your breast milk production is getting set and tuned. But, there is a threshold that is unique to every woman that they have to get. Like, some women are more affected with caloric fluctuations than others, but absolutely you need to eat to produce enough breast milk.
Yeah.
Breast milk production, like nursing, requires more calories and more nutrients than when you are pregnant. So just keep that in mind, like, especially in the immediate postpartum, your body has gone through so much. It just went through 10 months of building a human.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay to give yourself grace and to not enter this sort of like catabolic venture of trying to get your body back, because honestly, like, why would you want to get your body back? You've just achieved the greatest feat human nature has to offer. Like, I think that you have to respect that and give your body mad props for what it just did, and allow it to heal and give itself time to heal and nourishment. So,
and on that front too, there's a lot of nutritious decisions that you can make to help with the healing process, right?
Yeah.
I think the first thing we made was like a very like collagen, gelatin, like a chicken noodle soup, and with lots of protein and vegetables and all that extra nutrition. And we were adding ingredients to give her that sort of stuff just to help with the healing process.
Yeah. We have been very intentional with the foods that I ate. I was told by the by the pediatrician that I have bionic breast milk because
that was a fun statement he made.
because the baby is so big and he's a breastfed baby, and so that was cool. I also had pelvic floor recovery was great. There's nothing wrong. Some of my two of my muscles were a little tighter than the others, so I've just been working on that, and it's been great. And I had no diastasis recti, so the separation of the abs. So that was really awesome to know that all the work that I did preparing before pregnancy and during pregnancy was really supporting my postpartum recovery. Let's see. One of you asked things that you did / took to help support your body the first week after birth. So a lot of, just to piggyback on what Alex was saying about the foods that we were so intentional with, a lot of them are actually from the recipe guide that I have. It's called Innate Nourishment, and they're basically like really intentionally formulated recipes that have like tons of the nutrients, and they're prepared in the ways that would support postpartum healing. So you really want to make it as easy as possible for your body to get nutrients and reduce the stress as much as possible on your body in terms of forcing it to digest food and like spend so much energy on that when it really needs to be focusing on healing your uterus. Your uterus was the size of a watermelon. It needs to contract and then also heal the tissues inside of it. You have a wound that is the size of your placenta in your uterus, and that also needs to heal. So really allowing for that environment to be able to heal and providing your body with the fuel it needs, the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, the amino acids, the carbohydrates, the fats to really support all that. So that's really what I focused on in especially not even just the first week after pregnancy, but like first, I would say, month and a half at least.
Yeah.
Anything you would add? I mean, you were just feeding me.
Yeah, it's kind of one of my roles in this family. I really like cooking. So.
He's a really amazing cook. And
it's fun to put together recipes based off of specific ingredients that Loren would like to include in these recipes for whatever reason, whether it's healing or it's preparation. It's just, I like to focus on that piece of it to help kind of support her during pregnancy and also postpartum.
Yeah. He's the flavor. I'm like the raw ingredients person. I want this combination of nutrients, or like I want to make a recipe with this, and then he will come up with like, okay, we can add this and this
Make it
flavor
taste good.
in. Yeah. So really, honestly, you're like the co-author of that recipe. And you feed me really well. And I'm grateful. Another question is, are there things you wish you would have focused on more during the preconception/pregnancy part? I would personally say during pregnancy, I wish I had taken more downtime. I was working a lot. I was working on relaunching Conscious Conception. I wanted to get this updated version out to you guys because I know how much it was needed. And I am so glad I did, because there have been so many pregnancies since the launch, and it hasn't even been a year. I'm just like blown away. Every week is like, what? You're pregnant? Oh my God. So many stories. It's beautiful, but it did take a toll on me in just not being able to like take the downtime that I needed. I sacrificed some time with him. I sacrificed some time with family. I sacrificed some time just like taking naps, like my body needed. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why baby E doesn't sleep. But, that's kind of what I would have changed. I would have probably pushed it out or figured out another way to get you the information you needed without sacrificing so much. But is there anything else you would have done?
I think, just maybe supporting you as a little bit more, given how busy you were. To be honest, like I was slightly selfish, like, I gotta get a lot of stuff in before the baby comes, right? Play a lot of golf, but, just making sure I'm as present as possible, which I was, but, just making sure like getting you the support that you needed as much as you needed it. Could have been a little bit more in focus, but I think overall it was fine. But again, if you're working and there's time, right, there's only so much to do. But if we could have found that balance together, maybe as a focus, would have been great.
Yeah, spend a little bit more time together. But you supported me, you gave me the space, and you also made sure I was fed. So that was a huge help. One of the questions is, what's been the hardest thing for you postpartum? So honestly, sleep.
I knew that was going to be the answer.
I am so glad I prepared my body, because to be running on this little sleep is very difficult.
Every baby's different, though. We've talked to a lot of different people. Some babies sleep better than others. Some babies don't sleep as well as others. Baby E tends to be on the more difficult side for sleep. But, we're making changes and we're adapting, and we're seeing some progress, and that's what's important. So, and he's a healthy baby because a lot of the preparation work that Loren did preconception and postpartum and during the pregnancy, right? So it helped set him up for success once he was born. So the fact that he's healthy is amazing, but we do wish that he would sleep a little bit better.
He's in like the 90th percentile or above for like weight, height, everything. His developmental milestones have come super early, every single one, but he does not sleep.
He does not sleep.
Or when we say he does not sleep,
he sleeps. He just wakes up a lot.
He wakes up a lot, and he's like one of those babies that needs very on the lower end of the spectrum of sleep. He's just
and he kind of tends to need a little bit of extra, kind of like, it's okay, sleep time.
Yeah,
he doesn't. You don't just put him down.
He just has major FOMO, and so that's been hard. we've had to adapt, and we've made as much work as possible. And we're constantly adapting because things are constantly changing. But part of it is just like also not caring how little sleep you're getting. I was talking to my friend Holly the other day, and she was like, yeah, that's when it changed for me. And I was like, yeah, honestly, when I stopped caring, that's when things really shifted. But,
Yeah. I think I cope a little bit better than you, probably because I like to drink caffeine, and that's helpful. So, I can always have a nice big cup of coffee in the morning to help me get ready for work after a rough night of sleep. But
yeah, I've like really not done caffeine because I'm going to try to sleep when he's sleeping. And usually we co-sleep.
yeah.
So I'm going to take every chance I can get to catch up. But that's honestly been the hardest part. But you'd be amazed what you can get done on just like 3 hours of sleep.
Yeah. Full day of work.
Yeah. So, yeah. Somebody else asked, and let's just taking things like a little bit earlier in the timeline. Somebody asked how you prepared for getting pregnant. So is there anything that you did for preconception, or did you prepare for conception, basically?
Absolutely prepared on your guidance and the research that you've put together, taking specific supplements, making certain food choices, cutting things like alcohol. I tried to basically get my body in the healthiest state I could while also taking additional nutrients that promote my sexual health, so we could have a successful pregnancy. That, working out as well, try to boosting my testosterone, just normal kind of activities like that. But, I think with Loren's guidance and, the research that she's put into the course and, potential future offerings that can help men with preconception as well, we got pregnant on the first try. So I think all of the work that we did together made us fortunate enough to get pregnant on that first try. So, absolutely. I think there are things that men can do to prepare for this. From a pregnancy standpoint, obviously it's all going to be the woman, right? But what we can do to prepare ourselves to at least help with a successful pregnancy, we should do that and prepare for it.
Yeah. He really put in a lot of work. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but like...
Well, thanks.
No, I mean, like, I don't want to like make it seem like you changed your complete.
No. I mean, it's nutrition choices and adding things or subtracting things, but doing it in a deliberate way.
Yeah, very intentional tweaks, like here, dialing down this, dialing up this, and like in a way that you won't have to overhaul everything, because like it has to be sustainable. And
you want to make strong swimmers, right?
Yeah.
Strong, healthy swimmers. That was the goal. And I think there are things you can do to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It takes two to tango.
It does.
And it, your health also affects, your sperm health also affects how my pregnancy will go. There are pregnancy complications linked back to sperm health. So it's really, really important to get both partners preparing. And that's why you alluded to it, but I'm going to be releasing a male preconception resource soon. So stay tuned for that because I'm excited and it's much needed. But yeah, I think that, it's definitely a partnership for sure.
Yeah. and men should do their part in this as well, right? It's not just as simple as having sex with your partner and boom, you're going to get pregnant, right? There's a lot you can do to have both of you prepare for a successful pregnancy.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any other parting words that you would like to bestow?
Be there for your ladies, men, if you're listening. Provide support, do your part, make the effort. I think, like Loren said, it does take two to tango, and there's a lot of things that you can do to help for a successful pregnancy, and you should do them. So those are my words of wisdom for you.
I think they're very wise words. Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Happy to be here. Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, let us know how you like this episode, and yeah, maybe we can do a part 2 or do a Q&A with Mr. Innate Fertility at some point, but I'll answer the rest of the Q&A. I appreciate you joining, hubby.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to join.
All right, guys. For the Q&A portion of this episode, I am kind of going solo on this, but trust me, Mr. Innate Fertility has definitely contributed to a lot of the answers. And these are questions that you asked on Instagram, but also if you're a course student in conscious conception, I am answering your questions as well. So there's a mixture of questions. There's quite a few, so I'm just going to dive right in and get to it. So the first question is, I actually want to know more about your pregnancy. 14 weeks thanks to your course. So first of all, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I am so rooting for you and for your pregnancy. Regarding my pregnancy, definitely listen to the earlier part of this episode, but definitely also check out season 2, the last episode of last season, where I talk about my fertility and pregnancy journey. I'll include a link in the show notes of this episode. But my pregnancy was incredible. It was very smooth, very healthy. I felt vibrant, I felt energetic, and I couldn't have asked for a better pregnancy. So definitely check that out. I also talk about what I did, interventions that I opted in for, opted out of, and more. So check it out. The next question is, did you have doubts that you could do it? If so, for how long? I'm 22 weeks and struggling. So I never really had doubts. And a lot of the doubts that I think women have are kind of like subconsciously ingrained in them because of the movies that we grew up watching that really show birth as this intense, crazy, chaotic, painful thing where, a woman needs to be helped and is not capable of birthing and is just like completely helpless. That is not the way that birth is, at least in my mind. Of course, I had to do a lot of this undoing, but I've been doing that for a long time. And since I've been coaching, it's just not even a thing. And it's something that I coach a lot of my clients and students on too, is to kind of let go of these sort of biases that we have grown up getting planted in our heads. And the way that you perceive something is going to influence the way that you experience it. And so a lot of the aspects of like doubts really come from our perceptions, and we need to do a lot of undoing to get those out of our heads. So a few things that helped me feel prepared and helped me feel like I could do it. I never had doubts that I couldn't do it. I felt completely stress-free about leading up to labor and delivery because I was ready for it. I didn't have any doubts or worries that my body wasn't going to be able to do it. Honestly, that is the God honest truth. And I think a lot of what helped with that was preparing. So I had prepared my pelvic floor for a long time, my nervous system for a long time. I knew what I was going to eat during labor. I was educated on the entire process. And so I really didn't have a lot of worry, and a lot of the preparation I was doing way before even getting pregnant. I also knew that thousands of generations of women have done it before me. And I was really inspired by that. And I did a lot of family tree research, honestly, leading up to my birth, something that I really enjoyed doing and was just called to do. And I was just continuously in awe of the women in my lineage. They had 12 children multiple times. And like, back then, I know I had family on an island and, they were farmers. Like we have so much available to us to make birth comfortable. They did not, and they still did it many, 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 many times over. And I think just take solace in the fact that like your body in its DNA knows what to do because that's what all of the women before you have done. Literally, that's why you're here. So I think if you can look at it from that perspective, I think it takes a lot of that stress off. And that's just, one way of looking at it and just a little bit of what I would say to you. But, take some time to really, really process that and see if that helps. What helped you prepare for the pain? Did you take courses, read books to help with your breathing/perspective during labor? So a lot of the work that supports the body's natural processes for labor involves proper pelvic floor engagement and nervous system regulation. And these are two things that I focus on a lot during pregnancy, but even more before that during my preconception period, because I wanted to have a really regulated pregnancy. And knowing how to relax your pelvic floor, knowing how to cope with stress and pain in ways that work for you, not anyone else, understanding how you respond to stress, pain is also key to figuring out what will work for you. As I mentioned earlier too, I think a lot of people get the pain-free birth movement completely wrong, and they're upset and they feel like they are sold something that didn't work, and because their birth wasn't pain-free. Birth is intense and it can absolutely be painful. I am not saying that birth is not pain-free. My birth was painful, especially at a certain point, but it's the education of the process and the making things less painful through understanding and intention that really help you get through it as well. In addition to having that body support, that neurological nervous system support, that pelvic floor support that can just run on autopilot because you've practiced it so much, in terms of when the pain gets intense, just being able to surrender instead of worrying and becoming so overwhelmed with it that you just clam up. All of this paired with pelvic floor nervous system prep and also knowing my own boundaries and limits really helped me get through the very long active labor that I had, even when things were hitting a wall, as you know, my husband and I shared. And I think also like a lot of the exercises that we do pre-conception in terms of connecting with our babies in my course, we engage that too during labor. We want to continue the momentum of that. And that really is something that I held on to too. I was never like, oh, I can't meet you right now. I was just like, I'm ready to meet you. I can't wait to meet you. And I think that was one of the things that I really tried to flex during my labor too, is just being that open and receptive person, that woman, that mother that my baby needed me to be for him. Your nutritional support during labor and delivery. I had so many options for liquids like coconut water, electrolyte powders, juices, broths, so that I could stay hydrated. A lot of the supplements in the hydration lesson in Conscious Conception, I utilized a lot of the sort of like things that we talked about. I utilized that. That was like my my Bible for labor and delivery. As far as food, we were a little less prepared because, as you learned on the episode, we thought that we were going to go into labor like a lot later. We ended up going to labor slightly early. So we had a lot of snacks in the house, but my husband immediately, as soon as I started going into labor, started making lamb stew. So it smelled really good in the house, and I ate that throughout the labor. I really didn't have a lot of appetite, but I forced myself to eat to continuously make sure that I had enough calories and energy to continue laboring because it was so rapid and quick. And I also had things like dried fruits, even some nuts. I'm not a huge fan of nuts, but I really needed a fat to help stabilize my blood sugar, or at least I wanted to have this to support my blood sugar stabilization when I didn't feel like eating. And I knew that I needed to kind of re-up on my calories. So that's when I really flexed and utilized those things like nuts, which I typically wouldn't eat a ton of, but they were very helpful and they served their purpose as a tool. So that's kind of what I ate. And, of course, when you transfer to the hospital, if you do get an epidural, you're on a liquids only diet. So just FYI, if you didn't know that, I was limited to just liquids at that point, but I really tried to varietize what I was eating. Like I had dairy, milk, yogurt, I had broth again, I had Jell-O, that kind of stuff, just to really get some calories in me and continue the sustenance to support my energy during labor. So that's kind of what I did once I transferred to. What techniques did you use to get through transition? So a lot of breathing, really controlled breathing to control my heart rate, to control sort of like my reaction in terms of my nervous system. A lot of counter pressure. Sometimes I didn't want counter pressure, but sometimes I did. And my husband would perform a lot of the counter pressure. But sometimes men are really strong and sometimes it was too much. And so sometimes I needed a little bit gentler counter pressure, which is where my doula came into play. And, they would also communicate and she would coach him as well because she's done this so many times. So it was really helpful. Dim lighting. I also was wearing this terry cloth poncho. It was like a towel poncho. and I just had the hood over my head a lot of the time because I just wanted to be like in my own little space. And it was really comfortable because it helped me transition from like the shower to the bath, to the bed, to the bathroom, like, and really easily. So that's literally what I wore my entire labor. And changes of scenery. So as I mentioned, I was transferring different areas, and it would help me to labor on the toilet. It would help me to labor on the bed. It would help me to labor on my hands and knees on the floor. It would help me to labor in the bath. It would help me to labor over the counter in the bathroom. Like, I was changing the scenery a lot depending on what I was feeling. And like, if something wasn't feeling good at that time, I would just say, I need to move somewhere else. And I would choose a spot and labor there. So that's kind of what I did, and that's what worked for me through the transition, especially as things got really intense and you have the chattering teeth and stuff like that. How long was your labor? Any complications with birth, postpartum, breastfeeding? So I had about 34 hours of active labor. Yes. And as I mentioned, like, we thought I would be giving birth that evening. So maybe within 6-7 hours, but that wall that we hit was really what extended it. And it was just the baby's head was cocked in the wrong position and kept banging on my cervix. So it got inflamed, and it was just like this vicious cycle. And we tried natural remedies, but we really just needed, at the end of the day, to transfer. And that's what really helped provide me the rest and decrease the inflammation that was going on, to allow baby to pass through vaginally. So that said, endurance was much needed. I'm so glad I did a really intentional exercise to prepare for labor. Otherwise, as far as like complications with birth, postpartum, breastfeeding, I would say like we transferred. You can consider that a complication. It was literally just my plan B, and I will talk about that more again. But as you know, like, I have zero disappointment about it. Otherwise, like, he was perfectly healthy, and so was I. So that's what allowed us to give birth vaginally and have this like long extended labor. And I believe a lot of it was the preparation that I did. If I was not prepared cardiovascularly, mentally, it's very possible that I could have gone into a really gestational hypertension state very early on, or like he would start to be stressed. So we were both very regulated throughout the entire process. And I think that was really a lot of the nervous system regulation, a lot of the endurance exercise that I did to prepare for labor, and also pelvic floor control, which really made things really smooth once I was ready to push. I also had barely any blood loss. The placenta came out also really smoothly, barely any blood loss after that too. I had an amazing placenta, amazingly healthy, super, 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 super deep red. It was just like beautiful. And no tearing and no diastasis. A little, once I got evaluated for that a few weeks later. But I was evaluating myself and had a postpartum wrap-up session with my pelvic floor physiotherapist as well. And so I was really happy to hear that, because my belly was very big compared to, and it was really big in like the middle near my belly button. I did not carry low. I did not carry high. It was just like the middle was just like really, that was the, I guess, like, if you would call it like the most stretched point. And so I was really happy to hear that too and feel that. I felt like I had good abdominal control really early on again. So my postpartum, my breast milk came in well and really healthily. I didn't have oversupply or undersupply. It was like a perfect amount. It also got called bionic breast milk by our pediatrician, who we also carefully chose and love and respects our wishes too. As I mentioned earlier, baby E did end up having a tongue tie. We didn't move on it until around the 3-month mark because he was eating so well before that. But I will talk more about this because it deserves like a dedicated episode. And I think I'm going to have his occupational and physical therapist on too, because I love their approach. And I think it's so important for families to be knowledgeable about this in case they're dealing with it, because a tongue tie revision will not be the only thing that solves the tongue tie. You need more than just a revision. So we'll talk more about that. But that, I would say, like, that is a complication postpartum and a complication with breastfeeding. But again, more to come on that soon. Would you home birth again? If so, what would you do differently and what would you keep the same? We kind of answered this earlier, but I wanted to answer the second part. So I honestly wouldn't do much differently. I plan to have as few people as possible at my birth to support my introversion, but also my nervous system needs. I just know that I respond better when there's less people around. And so I made a really intentional choice to limit the number of people at my birth. We also had candles in my bedroom, which was very dimly lit, and bathroom, which was very dimly lit, which is also where I did a lot of my laboring. We had lavender essential oil and a diffuser going. I really, really enjoy the scent, and it's very soothing for me. Early on, we put on some music, but I quickly didn't want any, and I found it very distracting. So I labored in silence, and it was fine for me. Bless my husband, my midwife, and my doula, but like, I don't know. I'm sure it would have been nicer for them, but I didn't care. That's what I needed. I needed silence. And so you find that you will cope differently from the next person, but also throughout your labor, you might need different things. You might find that music is really supportive during your transition, but I found it like I didn't want any. So another thing too, like I mentioned, I wore a poncho towel, a towel poncho. And literally that's what I wore the entire time. It kept me warm, but also helped me through the different environments that I was transitioning to and from. So loved that. Highly recommend having one for labor. I loved it. It was hooded too, so I could put the hood on and close my eyes if I wanted to. And it allowed me enough freedom to move around. So loved it, loved it, loved it. And like I mentioned, I would have probably prepared food and a hospital bag for our plan B sooner, but we were really banking on us going past our due date quite a bit. So I would probably get that ready like at least 2 weeks before my quote unquote due date. But that's really what I would do differently. I was ready for this home birth and really understood what was going to happen. So perhaps this is a slightly different perspective, but if I could do it again, I would. And whenever my husband and I are ready to have a second, there will be baby E in the mix too. So we'll definitely have to plan that out, but I haven't decided if I would like him to be part of the birth or not at home. I think it'd be really beautiful, but I've also, I want to think about that a little more too. So, I think everyone is different too, and this is just what worked for me. So feel free to ask around other people, other women, other students, other women in your community, and see what they would have done differently for their home births as well. Everyone is a little bit different in what they prefer. Like, I know women that want their home birth to be like a party, and that it works for them, but that absolutely would not work for me. So it's different. To each their own. All right, next question is, did you experience postpartum hair loss? I did, and I want to be super clear. You are going to experience it. It's just a matter of how much. So I have not dieted. My movement has been very gentle, and I've kept up with intentional foods and supplements. My postpartum hair loss has stopped and is on the up and up now, and I never felt like it got unwieldy or looked horrible. My hair is also longer than it's been in over a decade and looks very healthy and full. So, I think that everyone is a little bit different in terms of how much they lose, but to minimize the amount that you lose, truly, 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 preconception preparation is very helpful for nutrient stores, which is really a huge part of postpartum hair loss. You are going to be not sleeping. You are going to have stress. So like trying to mitigate all the other stressors and really supporting those nutrient stores and maintaining those nutrient stores that help you make hair and that your hair is made of will also be helpful. I think that's a huge, huge part of it. So because of all the nutrient stores that I had going into pregnancy and postpartum, I feel like my hair loss was pretty minimal despite like the hormonal drop that occurs that triggers that. So that's what I would say about that. Don't be fooled by people saying like, I didn't experience any postpartum hair loss. They definitely did. It's just a matter of how much. So maybe they didn't have like a lot, but everyone experiences postpartum hair loss, even dogs that are postpartum. It's just a normal biological process, a side effect of giving birth. Did your birth go as expected? I'm a first-time mom dealing with disappointment after mine. So I think there's so much beauty in preparation, and it can help you optimize the conditions and give you confidence throughout the process, because planning can help you maintain the things that you can control versus the ones you cannot. However, you do have to release and surrender in birth. Going into birth with expectations can lead you to experiencing disappointment. Going back to preparation, it can help you optimize things and give you confidence in your decisions and the decisions that you're making throughout the process, but it can also help you maintain control of the things that you can. However, again, trying to control everything is going to, one, not allow your nervous system to be where it needs to be to give birth, and two, it so often leaves people disappointed. I prepared my best. I knew my body was ready. I had plan A, B, and C, all of which I was comfortable with. I made sure of that so that if plan A didn't work out, we could move into plan B smoothly and be prepared for that. And that's why, even though you could say things didn't go as expected, I have zero disappointment or trauma about the way that things went. And I will say this again too. I think a lot of women go into birth with expectations because of what they see on Instagram and what they believe, this is like the epitome of the pinnacle of like the ideal birth, or they believe this one way of birth is the only way, and they don't even consider preparing for another alternative. And they end up white knuckling their way through their entire labor, even once their body starts to tell them that it needs something different. And even though the decisions they're making themselves are actually creating trauma for them, and they end up more than just disappointed. And it's not just happening to first-time moms, it's even happening to women that are having their second or third births, and they're trying to have this redemptive birth that they wanted the first time around. They are also white knuckling to have that redemptive birth. And I really think that it's difficult to, watch even close family members do that or close friends do that. Again, I think it's different for me because I'm a practitioner and I've seen it all. I chose home birth as my preferred option, but I also had backup alternatives. And I think the more extreme people are about things, especially when it comes to birth, honestly, I think the less experienced they are. And I encourage everyone, of course, to vouch for their dream birth and to do everything they can to make it happen, but to not let that get in the way of the communication that they need to have with their body to make sure that they, for a lack of a better term, ruin it for themselves. And I know this is a bit of tough love because it's easy to be enchanted by what you see on Instagram versus the reality of what actually happened. But I really do encourage everyone to have a plan A, B, and C, because if things don't go the way you're expecting and you do need to change things, what is that thing going to be? And it's difficult to process that and think about that when you're in the middle of labor. You're more likely to give your power away when you're in that vulnerable state. So if you don't have a plan B or C, of course, you're likely going to say, yes, doctor, do whatever you think is best. And they're going to do it, and it's probably not what you want or perfectly aligned with what you want. And so having that plan and trying to account for like different scenarios, and your birthing support should be able to support you with this, like your midwife, or if you're taking any sort of like supplemental birthing course, they should be walking you through what that looks like. I think it's really important to prepare not just for your ideal birth, but also for other things that might come along. What will you do then? Are you comfortable with this? Or are you comfortable with that? How can you choose something that is going to make you feel at peace so that when you do give birth, you are just ready to give in and go with the flow and allow what needs to happen, and the transitions, wherever they're happening, whatever you need is still aligned with what you want, even if it's not at home anymore. So I will just come off my mic now, but I think I've kind of like said it enough, but I'm really serious about it. So anyway, to continue, next question. Did you wait at all to expose baby to younger children? By default, we just didn't have that many younger children around right away, but we did not wait to expose him to people, and we're not worried about him being around other children as long as, just use common sense. And that's where boundaries come into play too. Like, you have to be very clear to people visiting. Hey, don't come if you have a cold. Some people don't put that together, and sometimes they're like, oh, it's just allergies. No, just be very clear, like no sniffles, no nothing. Like we really want to protect our baby. Of course, we want you to visit, but just use common sense. And sometimes people's excitement gets in the way of common sense. So sometimes you have to withhold your boundaries around that and just be prepared to do that. But if our nieces and nephews had been around like super, super early on, like we would have wanted him to meet them right away. But we are in Colorado and most of our family's on the East Coast. So that just didn't happen right away. What did you do with your placenta? I encapsulated it. I was told it was an incredibly healthy placenta from the looks of it. I agreed, and I took the encapsulated pills throughout the first few weeks after birth. Nutrition focuses postpartum and practices for mental health postpartum. So we talked about my postpartum nutrition in the main part of the episode, but I do want to touch on the mental health aspect. And a big part of that is community and support and being aligned with my partner. So my husband and I have really good communication. We have a great relationship, really good communication. I would like to think we are both emotionally intelligent people and we communicate our needs very clearly before it becomes escalated. And we were and are continuously touching base on what each of us needs in the moment to feel supported and healthy. So having your partner on board and having clear roles for, kind of like responsibilities, what each of you is doing is going to be huge. And it's something that we discuss as well and are continuously discussing because, again, it's not like set in stone. Your needs may change, his needs may change, and you need to be able to be flexible and be adaptive. So communication is huge. And I think also having community friends and family to support you is also incredibly needed. Again, we don't have a huge support system here in Colorado because most of our family is on the East Coast. However, the people that I do have in my corner really showed up. And, I really think that having quality over quantity, great. But, having that support system is huge. Having friends, having family to lean on when you need a nap or a shower or like to bring you food, to just check in and see how you're doing is just super important. And start building that even before you get pregnant, but especially as you're going through pregnancy. Not just for the sake of like that, but try not to lose those connections that you already do have. And it's a really good time to, before the baby's born, to really touch base with everyone and make sure that those friendships and relationships are cared for too, because not only will you need them more than ever, it's going to be hard to kind of like make sure that you're maintaining them as you get busier too. So it's always good to kind of, touch base. In this process, I think also you will also need to set boundaries, and not only for your well-being, but the well-being of your baby. Like I mentioned earlier, people visiting, you need to use common sense. But for example, one of the things that I needed to create a boundary around was family that wanted to continuously visit during my postpartum period, but also wanted to be entertained. So it wasn't a postpartum visit, what do you need? Here, I'll hold the baby while you nap. Let me bring you food. It was like, we want to see the baby. And when they got here, it was like, do you have any food and beer? And I want to watch the football game too. So yes, that happened. And we let that family visit way less. And only when we were truly ready for that and we wanted to have an experience like that. Some people are honestly clueless. They make it about themselves. They can be very selfish. And because of that, boundaries are key. And typically I find that this is with the older generation, but I think that you'll be surprised at the people that kind of surprise you / disappoint you. It's okay to be selfish. It's okay to uphold boundaries. They will understand, and if they don't, that's on them. So another area I think regarding mental health is your body may be another thing that you find that you're contending with. And just know that by treating your body with respect, the respect that it deserves after 9 months of creating new life, and the fact that it's acting as the sole nourishment for your baby too, now is not the time to diet. Now is not the time to do intense exercise. Your body bears the beautiful marks of a woman who can create life, and that is invaluable. So don't be so sure that erasing that as quickly as possible to conform to societal standards is what you need to make other people comfortable or what they think is comfortable. Like, that is probably not what you need. So as far as mental health goes, it's okay to break up with that. It's okay to break up with societal expectations, and it's okay to be content with how you look even. So I know that can be hard for a lot of people to swallow. It's also okay to feel uncomfortable in your own skin. And a lot has changed, but it's also okay to be simultaneously in awe of what your body did and what it is doing. There's a lot of juxtaposed emotions in the postpartum period: happiness and sadness, discomfort, amazement. Talk to your friends and family that have been through it. One of the things that I did is I invested in some clothes that actually fit me. So I went to Target and I bought just a little capsule wardrobe of clothes that I could wear so that I felt comfortable. I felt like feeling put together helped me mentally, but in clothes that actually fit me. And that really, really helped a lot. And make time for yourself, but not so that you can get your pre-baby body back, but because you are a woman changed. So I know that's a lot to process, and it's way easier said than done, but it's something that you may find that you constantly fluctuate between as well, and that is completely normal, and you are not alone. I also think that for mental health reasons too, and again, I'm not a mental health expert, so please seek professional guidance if you are truly needing support. And if you need a referral, I'm happy to refer you to one of the very many holistic practitioners that do specialize in mental health. But I think you should have the expectations to have no expectations. Your baby may need to be held all the time. Your baby may not want to be worn. My baby certainly didn't. I thought that was going to... I thought that, our baby would love to be worn. He hates being worn. Your baby may not sleep through the night. You may not have time to exercise. You may not be getting back to the things that you wanted to do as quickly as you wanted to do them. It's okay. Like I mentioned, preparation is key and can help you navigate and find some new solutions for things and coping. But you also have to surrender and let go and go with the flow. So as far as mental health goes, I touched on a couple things that I've personally found very helpful for me in terms of postpartum, but also talk to your community and see what they would say as well. But hopefully this was helpful for you. Did you use any progesterone postpartum to help with it at all? I personally did not feel the need to use progesterone. I have coached my clients through using it though postpartum for support, and it's something that you can use, but every woman's body responds differently, so you have to know what to look out for. So I wouldn't say yeah, go use it. I think it needs to be done with supervision, especially postpartum, especially if you're nursing, because depending on how your birth was, depending on how your hormones, your detoxification, everything, it can not be great, it can be great, it really, again, depends, and you have to know what to look out for. You look glowing. Would love to know how you kept that glow and how to prepare your whole family / connections to give you what you need without feeling overwhelmed. I would also love to know, only if you want to share it, how you prepared emotionally / mentally, as you mentioned, relational traumas in the last podcast, how they took up space more for preconception, but would love to know how you moved past them and any techniques, lessons that have helped you with it. So the glow is good food and limiting stress as much as possible. I am not sleeping well still. My baby does not sleep through the night. He wakes up multiple times a night. So, I think I'm doing what I can to support myself in every other way without overloading or stressing myself out either. I'm not maniacally trying to hit every other area. I'm just kind of going with the flow, surrendering as well, and doing the things that I know how to support myself with the time that I'm given. Regarding preparing family, I think, I've heard crazy stories of women preparing PowerPoints, and if you want to do that and go that far to enable your family on what you expect, that's fine. But I think a conversation about expectations, kind of discuss it with your partner and see what you're comfortable with, and get ready to, these are my boundaries, and I really want you to respect them and be prepared to possibly, again, I think the older generation I think they feel more entitled to certain things. So they may have more negative reactions, but if they're really going to care for you, if they truly care for you, they will respect those. And, if they don't, then you have to be ready to uphold them, excuse me. So just be ready to do that. And I think regarding relational traumas, it's not like they're completely gone. But what I focus on and continue to focus on, because it's always a work in progress, are the things that I'm in control of and how I respond to them. And respond is a key word too, but I think even once you think your work is done, you may find that you're triggered by a different or new aspect of that trauma. And that's okay. It is part of the healing process. And instead of reacting, I step back and try to connect the dots for myself to understand why I was triggered. And through that, you also have a new understanding and a new way to cope that will support you in the future. So that each time the trauma does come up, it has less and less power over you, and you become less and less and less triggered. And I think that, again, trauma is not like a one and done kind of thing. It can really wreck your nervous system and be a blocker to getting pregnant, especially in the way that it influences your nervous system and if it is causing like a hyper reaction for sure. We store our traumas in our bodies as well, and they need to be worked through a lot of the time. But it's not going to protect you from future traumas. I mean, you may be emotionally regulated to have sort of like have future traumas have less of an effect on you. Just like you can't remove all stress from your life, you can't predict the traumas that you're going to have in the future. But by being a more regulated person, you can really protect yourself from the level of depth that they have over you and the control that they have over you. And so, I guess, long story short, it continues to be a work in progress, but I think that, it's just part of the journey, just like health, fertility is a journey, it's not a destination. So just keep that in mind. But I think that's a great question. I hope that was helpful to you. Has going through it made you sympathize with other clients more? So I think my clients would say that they have never worked with anyone that cares more than I do. And I've gotten feedback from my clients. That's like the endless, continuous feedback that I get. I care so much and I want my clients to succeed so much. I will literally do anything for my clients. And so that said, of course, firsthand experience is incredibly invaluable, and I'm bringing that, to my clients, of course, and my learnings and my, in real time support to them. So I will continue to do that as this journey continues. Do you have any routines to try and get your baby to sleep better? So no, we don't really do any type of sleep training, but we are incredibly educated on infant sleep, and we make sure that he is well fed, of course. We have a bedtime routine. We listen to his cues and help him settle when he needs us at night. He's not sleeping through the night. He's never been a great sleeper, quote unquote. We are going with the flow with him and what he needs. I think it is a big fat lie that your baby should sleep through the night, especially if your baby's nursing and breastfed. But I'm not going to get into that. There's a lot of different approaches. You also need to evaluate what you need for your mental health, what you need for your family. So my way is not the best way. My way is how we're doing it right now. Things are constantly changing. We're constantly tweaking things. We're learning new things. He's changing. So it's never settled. I think that the constant is the inconsistency. So you'll have to evaluate what is right for your family. I do love the book Safe Infant Sleep, and that's a really great book, but you have to evaluate what you feel most comfortable with, what you're able to provide to your baby. Like, there may not be enough room in your bed, or it's a completely personal decision. And so I respect anyone going through this phase and trying to figure it out. And yeah, Short answer, we're not doing any sleep training, but we do a lot of things to help promote good sleep and help promote restfulness so that we can sleep. So hope that helps answer your question. How did you navigate breastfeeding to make sure it was successful? So I made sure I ate foods to support my recovery, but also to support nutritious breast milk production and lactation. So both from the quality of the breast milk to the breast milk quantity production, eating a lot of nutritious foods and specific foods to support that. I've also been gently exercising, mostly walking, to make sure my body doesn't experience additional stress, considering how sleep has been going, which is another key support, at least for me. It's really important for me. So I've been kind of like tweaking little things here and there and optimizing things that I can to support and reduce stress. I was not pumping in the first few months, but after baby E's tongue tie became problematic, I transitioned to hybrid nursing and pumping and bottle feeding, which is not for the faint of heart. I am working on trying to get back to just nursing since his revision and since his therapy has gone so well. It's just going to be a matter of seeing if he can efficiently empty my breast or not. And so that kind of is a determining factor, because if that doesn't happen, there may be, you also have to monitor him for proper weight gain. Is he eating enough, even though he's not emptying it enough? But also, like, supply is determined by demand. So, if you go too long without taking care of that, your supply can kind of start dwindling. And so it's a balancing act. It's very, it's not for the faint of heart. It has ended up being a little more complicated than I expected, or wanted it to be, I should say. But I'm also going with the flow, and what's working right now may not work in the future. So just giving myself grace with that. And I think that is a key lesson for postpartum too, is just giving yourself grace. Things that you're doing every day to support yourself and physically. So I get sunlight in the morning. I try to support my circadian rhythm. I go for walks and get gentle exercise to support my lymphatic drainage, but also get some movement. It's really good for my mental health as well. I usually take baby E with me unless it's too hot. Sometimes it is too hot. And it's been there have been a couple days where it's been just like way too hot here in Colorado. I also take naps wherever I can, really try to catch up on sleep. I take my supplements. I'm really consistent about taking targeted supplements, but also intentional supplements, and being really, really consistent with that. Of course, my nutrition, super important. I don't skip meals. I keep snacks everywhere. I really try to support myself nutritionally because I know how important it is for my recovery, but also my reducing the stress on my body and making sure baby E is getting nutritious breast milk, supporting breast milk production. So all of that. I also properly engage my pelvic floor throughout the day when I'm doing various activities, which, also includes taking various moments to observe my breathing. A lot of women postpartum have very shallow breathing. And so I'm also engaging my pelvic floor, but making sure that I'm also breathing properly throughout the day, especially if I find myself just like shallowly breathing, which might also be like, it might be second nature, because if you also had a big belly and your diaphragm was kind of compressed during pregnancy, it can kind of like carry over into postpartum, even though your belly's not being compressed anymore. So just trying to take note of these things and doing, even if I can't dedicate like a workout, I am incorporating exercises, pelvic floor function, proper pelvic floor engagement into my daily routine. And then I'm also, taking a shower while my husband is on duty watching baby E. And I'll do little things for myself, like gua sha or dermaplaning my face or tweezing my eyebrows or trimming my nails, just to, do a little something for myself, which has really helped. And then, that's kind of going with the flow there. I'll take larger breaks, go to an appointment here and there if my husband has time, or we do have an amazing, amazing nanny. We feel so lucky to have found her. She comes just for a couple hours a week, but I think that allows my husband and I to also get time together alone. So we'll try to go for dates as well, which is really, really good for us and my mental health. Yeah, I mean, if you can find reliable help, which is really difficult, trustworthy help, even if it's not for every day, but just, the occasional date night, that can make a huge difference. So we definitely have been using that too. What were your postpartum must-haves, products, appliances, foods, teas, all of it? I think to make this easy, I'll create an LTK link and include a link to that list in the episode notes. And, you can use that and check that out. And with that, I think my brain is tired after all that talking with my husband. And now, so I'm going to go back to baby E. And I hope you've been enjoying this episode. I hope it was helpful. I hope it provides some different perspective, maybe from what you've heard from other podcasts or other people, things like that in your life. I hope that it gives you, new avenues to explore, and definitely don't feel like you can't reach out. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-up questions or want to chat more about my postpartum experience. And if there's, any requests for another Q&A, if you like this kind of like Q&A style part of the episode, happy to do more of them. Just let me know. Okay? All right, well, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode about my birth and early postpartum. And that wraps up season 3. I can't believe it. So definitely, if you have not listened to season 1 or 2, definitely check them out. But if you also have any requests for season 4, please send them to me. And I'm super excited to get started on that season 2 and bring you more helpful information about fertility, but also just health, wellness, and living a better life and creating a better version of yourself. So that's all for now. I hope to see you soon. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Innate Wisdom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and share the podcast with someone who you think might benefit. If you're new here, we can't recommend enough that you take advantage of my free resources, like the Get Pregnant Yesterday checklist, Cycle Literacy Guide, Prenatal Primer, and Sperm Booster Manual. And if you're trying to conceive now or in the near future, I invite you to join my pregnancy prep e-course, Conscious Inception. Make sure to follow me on Instagram too, at innate_fertility, and consider joining my newsletter to receive exclusive content related to fertility and so much more. A friendly reminder, the content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be a substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.